Welcome to a demonstration of Slate Project Intelligence. My name is Carl Paff, and I'm looking forward to taking you today through our tool. Just as a brief overview, Slate Project Intelligence is a tool that's used to find hidden risks to projects, and we do that by aggregating data from systems that are typically disconnected. We then look for connections between those data sets that typically are not connected and raise insights anywhere where we find a conflict at the intersection of that data. So just to get right into it, the first thing I want to show you is our insights. I'm going to navigate to our insights feature here. And within our insights, we break those into three different buckets. You'll see those across the top of the screen here. We have our schedule insights, our lesson learned insights, and our scheduling standards insights. The first ones I want to show you are our schedule insights. These are really easy for us to set up. All it takes is a schedule, and we accept P6, Microsoft Project, as well as Asta Power Project schedules. And then we'll connect to your systems where you're tracking forms and issues and checklists. And we have out-of-the-box connectors for things like ACC and Procore to make it really easy to integrate your data into our system. Once we've done that, we run what we call our auto-linking mechanism. It's an AI tool that we've developed to link all of the data in your forms and your issues and your checklists to all of the activities in your schedule. And then once we do that, we can look for any type of things in your forms or your issues that might have an impact on your schedule, and we raise that to users as insights. And I'll show you an example of that here. So I'm going to pull this drop-down menu here, which is our filters. What you're seeing is a running list of all of the insights in this project that fall within the scheduling insights bucket. And maybe I want to look at just submittals. So I'm going to filter this list, and it's going to show me just the insights related to submittals, which I'm seeing now. So I can scroll through these and see the different insights. And maybe I want to click on one of these and find out a little bit more about it. So I'll click on this one here. And this is an insight about electrical rough-in and a submittal about illuminated signage. So what's happened here is Slate has looked at the schedule. It's identified this activity, electrical rough-in, that is probably related to this submittal AOR illuminated signage. So as you can see, the system's found that because it's an illuminated signage, probably needs some electrical rough-in, and it's linked these two together. So here's my activity. If I click on that, I can view a few details about it. And then here's some details about my submittal that we've linked to. Now, because the due date on this submittal is after the electrical rough-in is supposed to start, you can see that by the dates here, the planned start and the due date, Slate's identified that this could be a risk to the project. So the idea is that since this submittal is likely not going to be closed out by the time that electrical rough-in needs to start, that means the electrical rough-in activity may not start on time and is very likely not to start on time. So we raise that to our users as an insight and give them the chance to intervene in that, hopefully speed up the review process of that submittal or perhaps resequence their schedule to avoid any sort of delays that might be happening to this electrical rough-in activity. And we've done that all through that auto-linking mechanism that we've built. Within this UI, the user can take a few different actions. We can give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. That helps to train the model. If for some reason this wasn't really helpful, maybe you want to give it a thumbs down, or if it was really helpful, maybe you want to give it a thumbs up. That just gives feedback to the model that we deploy within each customer's account as to what's useful and maybe what's not. If it's really not helpful at all, you can just delete it and it'll be removed from your feed. Or if you want to send this to somebody, you can click the email icon here, and this will send it out to users in your project. So you may want to send this to someone who's in charge of managing that submittal and let them know, hey, it's really important we get that submittal closed out so that we don't run into any conflicts with that activity. And we do this for any type of form that you connect to the system. So you'll see here we've got submittals, RFIs, issues. We're not limited to those form types. We can do those for other form types as well. Really, any type of form type where you're documenting issues and key workflows, we can look into those and look for any of those conflicts. And the way I like to think about this is you have your form system where you're managing all these forms and checklists and issues, and they all have workflows associated with them. And then you have your schedule where obviously it's one big workflow. And what we're doing is looking for the intersection of those workflows, something that's typically not documented, because we know if something happens with a submittal or an RFI, it could impact the schedule. And we want to find that as quickly as possible to give our users a chance to intervene and avoid any delays to their schedule. We also have another type of insight in the schedule insights bucket called weather insights. And what we do here is we look at the schedule and then we add weather profiles to all the activities. And that happens automatically when you upload a schedule. We use our AI engine to go through, read all the schedule activities and find ones that are likely sensitive to weather. The types of things we're looking for are rain sensitivity, temperature sensitivity, or wind, something like lifting. And then we look at the forecast for the next week. And if we find that there's rain forecasted next week and an activity is sensitive to rain, we'll raise that as an insight to let the user know, hey, you could have some rain this week that might impact your ability to complete a task. Here's an example of pouring concrete, giving a chance for the user to perhaps, replan their week so that they can avoid any of these conflicts or any costs that might come with delaying an activity or not being able to start that on time. And then we roll all that up into an impact analysis, which is right here. So I'm going to click on the impact analysis and you'll see overall Slate is forecasting a 19-day delay to this project. If I'd like, I can expand this and I can see what that looks like on an activity by activity basis. So what I'm seeing here are all the activities in the schedule where Slate has forecasted some type of delay on it. And I can see the delay that's been forecasted and the impact details. And this is just summarizing all that data I showed you in the feed. You can see here's an activity that has a delay impact coming from an RFI. Here's one coming from RFIs, submittals, and weather. So we roll that up at an activity level, and then we roll it up at an overall project level, account for the float, and give feedback to the user as to what the overall forecasted delay is for the project. So I can also filter this list by critical tasks if I click this button right here. And this is going to show me all the tasks in the project which have a forecasted delay that are on the critical path. Gives me a chance to focus my efforts and just focus on the critical path activities. I could also just view the activities that have the largest contribution to the delay. So now I'm viewing the top 5 contributors to the delay to the project. So if I want to see what activities have the largest delay, maybe that's where I want to focus my efforts. I can see that in this view right here. So those are our schedule insights. The next type of insights I want to show you are our lesson learned insights. So I'll navigate to our lesson learned insights here. And I'm going to go to our list view. And this is going to show me all the activity in the projects where Slate has found a lesson learned that's associated with that type of activity. So I'll click on this one here. This is an activity about installing brackets and a front soffit detail. And Slate has found in the library of lessons learned for this account that there's a lesson learned about siding and trim installation issues. So this is a lesson learned that's coming from historical data and is representing some type of issue that's happened in the past for people that working in this account. And we're now associating that with the activity in the schedule, letting the user know, hey, this happened in the past. Here's a description of some things that happened in the past and some preventative actions to prevent that from happening in the future. And so we go through and do that for all the activities in the schedule, and any activity where we have a lesson learned in our library, we'll associate that to the activity and then raise that as an insight to the user. And the way this is really helpful is that instead of needing to, at the beginning of the project, sit down and understand all of the lessons learned that might be relevant to your project, we link them to an activity and then we raise the insight at the right time. So if you think about a project, it could be a long project, 6 months, 12 months, maybe many years. You might get 6 months into the project and you might forget some of those lessons learned that you were supposed to pay attention to at the beginning of the project. With our tool, we'll notify you of that lesson learned before that activity starts at the right time. That might be 2-3 weeks before it starts to be more timely and fit in with your workflow a bit more appropriately. Now, in order to get to this point where we have this lesson learned library, we'll work with our customer to build out a library for them. And we can do this in a number of ways. One of those ways is if you have an existing lesson learned library, we can just import that into our system and set it up. You may also have some best practices that we could draw on. We can bring those into our system and we can create lessons learned But what we typically find ourselves doing is digging into the historical data from projects to generate lessons learned for customers. So one of the things we found in working with customers is a lot of times they haven't documented their lessons learned in a really well structured way, if at all. If they have, it's typically living in some PowerPoints, some Excel spreadsheets, some Word documents, and it's not really in a type of format that can be utilized in a repeatable fashion. So what we can do is do deep historical analysis, use our generative AI tools to then generate lessons learned based on those. I'm going to click on the view source data here to give you a little idea of how that works. This is what we call our lineage view of lessons learned. On the left here is the lesson learned I was just showing you, that one about siding and trim installation issues. To get to this point where we had this lesson learned, we looked at 5 different projects, which are each of these dots here. These are each a project that was studied and historical analysis was completed on. And then we looked at all the forms in those projects. And what we found is amongst those 5 projects, all of these forms were dealing with the same type of issue, the same siding and trim installation issue. So we mined that historical data. We found what things happen frequently. We grouped those together. And then from there, we generate the lesson learned, creating an asset for our customers that they never had before. And this is where you end up. So you get a description and a preventative action that's been totally generated. It took no work from our customers to create this. It was all done with our Gen AI tools based on real historical data, giving customers a true objective library of lessons learned. So instead of trying to maybe sit down at the end of a project and write down some notes, and maybe everyone has a different perspective on why things didn't go the best ways in all circumstances, we take a really objective view, just study what actually happened, and then create a lesson learned for that, with the idea that if you understand the past, understand things that went wrong in the past, you can improve the future. And if things didn't go well in the past, it means they're probably going to be repeated in the future. But if we can give our users notification at the right time, within the context of the activities that are in their project about these things that happened in the past, then there's a good chance that we can prevent those happening in the future and take some intervention and prevent those from being mistakes that continue to happen, help reduce the cost from quality control issues and delays to the schedule from issues happening in projects. A few other features we have here is we can actually push this to Procore or any project management system that you want to set up in Slate. So if I hit push to Procore, what it's going to do, it's going to take me to Procore observations, where I can create an observation and I can let my teammates know, hey, there's this lesson learned that's really relevant to our project. I think we should pay attention to it, and we can track it as an observation. Another thing we can do is we can incorporate some of those templates that you may have set up in Procore or other systems. In this case, we're looking at inspection templates. So maybe you've gone through and created different inspection templates for things like concrete and framing and envelope systems. We can use those in 2 ways. One, we can use those to improve the preventative actions that we're giving our customers. So if you've already defined your internal best operating procedures, we can incorporate those into our preventative actions based on what you've already documented. And then we can allow the user to link to those. So if I click this link, it's going to take me to Procore, and it's going to open up an inspection template for a building envelope inspection, which is the type of inspection you'd want to complete for this lesson learned. So the idea is to provide all of the intelligence to our users around things that happened in the past and how they can improve that in the future, and then give them a jumping off point to go into their project management system and track these things to make sure that we close them out, we don't keep repeating the same mistakes, and ultimately improve the bottom line for our projects by bringing quality issues way down for our projects. And all of this gets sent out in a weekly digest email to our customers. So we'll send out our lessons learned insights as well as those scheduling insights that I was showing you early in a weekly email. It's kind of like a 2-week look ahead for your project, but instead of 2-week look ahead of just the activities that you have coming up, it's a 2-week look ahead of the insights related to the activities that you have coming up, to give our users a chance to make some interventions and hopefully improve the outcome and performance of their projects. Lastly, I want to show you our scheduling standards. So our scheduling standards are really simple to set up. All you need to do is load a schedule into Slate, and we'll run analytics on your schedule to understand if there's any best practices that could be improved within your schedule. Out of the box, we configure this on the DCMA 14-point analysis. And so we'll use that analysis to look at the schedule and identify things like maybe dangling activities, too many finish to start relationships, too many lead lag relationships. All of those items that have been defined as a best practice, we'll go through, make those checks, and then we'll let the user know if there's activities that are violating those best practices. And again, we set this up very easy out of the box. We use the DCMA 14-point analysis, but we can also customize that for our users. So if they have other scheduling best practices that they want to utilize, we can incorporate that into these checks to help improve the schedule health of the data that we're working with. And then after we've created all of these insights, we can view these in a dashboard as well. So I'll navigate to our dashboard. And what's really interesting in our dashboard is not that it's a dashboard. We've all seen dashboards before, but it's the data we have access to in our system to create this dashboard. So backing up a bit, we've brought in your form data, your checklist data, your issue data. We brought in your schedule activities. We've structured all that into standard formats. And then additionally, we add on what we call attributes to that data. So things like classification, something like a CSI code, location, where in your project did this form occur or this schedule activity occur. We can add things like trade. What type of trade is doing this activity? So we add those on with our generative AI engine, which allows us to create a lot of different data graphics and data intelligence, things that people might not have access to currently. So I'll walk you through a few examples of this, but this is really a flexible dashboard. We can create different types of data widgets here, really based on whatever the customer needs for their use case. And that's part of our implementation process. We'll sit with you, understand what you need for data graphics, and we can create those really quickly in our dashboard. The top two tiles here are showing you activities at risk and work hours at risk. And the idea here is we've associated all of these insights with your activities, and that's a proxy for risk. So wherever we see an insight in an activity, that means that perhaps something could go wrong with that activity, and that's some risk to your project. And so this allows a user to understand what's the quantum of that risk? How much risk is there? In this case, there's 102 activities over the next 3 months, which may be impacted by an insight. And we can even do some things like, well, how many work hours does that represent at risk? Over here on the far right, we have those activities at risk over a timeline, and we're sorting them by critical and non-critical. And what's really cool about this dashboard, it's interactive. So I can click on the critical bar here, and it'll apply a filter to all of the data, and you'll see it all update. So now I'm just seeing the critical activities in this dashboard in all of the different data widgets. And I can remove that filter really easily. Just click X right there. Down here, I'm showing a graph of planned start versus remaining float for activities. So what's interesting here is if I'm trying to focus my efforts, what activities should I focus on? Which have the most risk? Which could have the biggest impact to my schedule? I can see which activities are starting soon based on that planned start date and how much float is into those activities. So if I look at something like this activity up here in this yellow dot, elevator number 1, it's starting soon. It has some insights related to it that might be a risk to the project, but there's a lot of float. So even if that pushes a little bit, it might not impact my schedule. I contrast that with this gray dot down here, electrical rough-ins. This has negative float. So this is already behind schedule. Now we have insights associated with it. So that's very likely that there's a lot of risk associated with that activity. So if I'm trying to figure out where to focus my efforts, I'm probably going to focus down here and not up here. We can create different tabs in this dashboard. We can even create persona views, like for a project manager or for a project executive. I'll click over to this other view for our lesson learned view. And this is showing how many forms fed into all of our lessons learned, the count of lessons learned in this project. And then this chart here, I think is really interesting. We can see the breakdown of lessons learned by CSI division. So I can see most of my lessons learned are in MEP. So if I'm trying to decide, hey, where should I allocate my labor to help reduce risk to my project? Well, MEP is probably a good place to look as that's where most of my lessons learned are occurring. Then we can create heat maps. This is a heat map here, which is showing CSI division versus issue type. So CSI division is one of those AI generated attributes that we created, as well as issue type. So we looked at all the forms, we added these attributes to them, and now we can find some pretty interesting stuff. We see that a lot of those issues are occurring in MEP, like we saw above in that pie chart. And we're also seeing that the types of issues are primarily leaks and equipment malfunctions. So again, if I'm looking where to focus my efforts, it's MEP and it's issues around leaks and malfunctions of equipment. That's where I can get the most bang for my buck if I'm trying to decide where to spend my time on resolving some of these risks to my project. And then the last chart I want to show you, or I should say the last graph I want to show you, called our insights map. And what this is a graph of all of the connections that our system has made. And it's quite wild. I'll zoom out a little bit. You can see it's just a massive graph. It's very dense. There's lots of connections. And so what do you do with this? Well, it really tells me the complexity of what's happening behind the scenes. As we bring in these forms and do this on a continuous basis, and make links between all of your different data sets, that's what this represents. And it shows how difficult it would be to do this with just a human. You really need AI tools to do this sort of thing because this graph is immense, it's very complex, and it's constantly changing. Projects are always changing, and so this graph will always be updating as we bring more data into the system and as the schedule changes. Next, I want to show you just behind the scenes a little bit so you can get a sense for how this works. The first thing I'm going to show you is our connectors. So we have the ability to connect to a few systems out of the box, and we can build custom connections as they're needed for our customers. I'll click on this connection wizard here, and this shows me everything that's live in this project right now. I can see things like Autodesk BIM 360, Procore, all the different forms that are connected, as well as the schedule, in this case being a P6 schedule. So if I want to manage any of these connections, I can do it from this page right here. Very simple. Every time a new form comes into the system, we're running that auto linking on it and making new associations and potentially new insights. And I want to give you a view into that as well. So this is our auto linking feature. I really think of this as like back of house. It's not something our customers really ever need to interact with, but if they want to, it's here. We know a lot of people want to see, hey, how's this really working? And you can see it here. So across the top, you're seeing issues, RFIs, submittals, any type of form or checklist that we have connected to our system would show up here as a button. I'll show you RFIs here, and I can click on one of these activities. This is, one of these RFIs. This is an RFI about a pool clarification. And this is showing two activities that we've linked to it. So what's happened here is we've loaded the RFI into our system. We've then ran auto linking on that RFI in the schedule. And we found two activities that are probably related to that RFI. And now that we've made that connection, we know these things are related. And if at any point in the project, this RFI starts to have an impact to that schedule based on the dates in those RFIs, in that RFI, we'll then raise that as an insight, where we started in the insights feed. Over here, you can see some actions. If for some reason we didn't make a good connection, you could give it a thumbs down, help give some notification to the model that it wasn't a good match. But these matches are typically really high quality and don't require user intervention to come review these. But they're here if you want to review them and make sure that all of those links being made are things that you want to be linked. And we do a similar thing for our lessons learned. So this is the library of lessons learned for this project. Again, back of house, not something you really need to interact with, but if you want to come view and understand how these links are being made, here I can see a lesson learned about relocating water meter to avoid door obstructions. And I'll see down here all of the activities that have been linked to it. So plumbing and door activities have been linked to this lesson learned. And now when those activities are getting ready to start, an insight will be given to the users about this lesson learned. And if I'd like, I can come in here and maybe I want to see everything having to do with concrete. I can search concrete. This will show me all of the lessons learned for concrete in this project. And then lastly, I want to show you our converse feature. So converse is the feature that really connects everything. It's our interactive chat feature. It's connected to all of the data in the system and allows us to do things like maybe I want to ask it, are there any issues? Our converse feature will go through, look at the data in the project and see if there's any issues. And in this case, there's one. There's something about changing ceramic tile to polished concrete. So this avoids me from needing to dig through different systems and logs to find these issues. I can just get that directly in our converse feature. We can also do things like, can you give me a project update? So maybe I just kind of want a general update of the project, an overview, and it'll generate that for me. And it'll tell me details about the project, forecasted dates, key scheduling dates, what phase it's in. This one's in the shell stage. Tell me about RFIs and issues in the project, and then give me a narrative about all those RFIs and things that are happening in the project. So you can see that all here. We'll even at the very bottom give you a weather forecast for the project. So this converse feature allows you to look across all of the data that Slate is connected to and query that and find that and have it return in this chat. Thanks for your time today. If you have any questions about Slate Project Intelligence or any of our other products, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, Carl Paff, or any of our sales team. We look forward to connecting with you.